the 2025 Vermont Conservation Voters Lifetime Environmental Achievement Award Ceremony. My name is Justin Marsh, I'm Political Director at VCV, and I appreciate you all joining us on this gorgeous evening. When Dick, Mark, and I got together to figure out this date, we did not anticipate it would be the first gorgeous evening of the year, but it is, and I still appreciate you all showing up for this lovely evening here in Orange County. First, a couple housekeeping things. I want to thank Bob Farnham for recording this for those who can't be here tonight. We've enlisted a couple great Windsor District businesses tonight. We've got the Pittsfield Original General Store with the Eats this evening, and Jesse from Bethel's Babes Bar. So tonight we are honoring two former legislators that served this great state for a combined 70 plus years. Over the course of their legislative careers, Mark MacDonald and Dick McCormack have been steadfast environmental champions, passing legislation that makes the air we breathe cleaner, the water we drink safer, the communities more resilient that we live in, and our natural resources protected from poorly planned development and sprawl. Yes! And we're thrilled that you joined us here to celebrate their advocacy and their careers. Here to share more with you about Vermont Conservation Voters, please welcome our Executive Director, Dan Davis.
Thank you, Justin. Everyone should give a hand to Justin. Everything that's happening tonight is because Justin has done so much work. And now what's happening for folks, this is one of our first public events since I took over as Executive Director, and our former Executive Director, Lauren Hurl, is here, who's done so much amazing work. So let's give her a hand. Lauren has given me an unbelievable organization to run. The organization's been around since 1982, and we've been electing climate champions since that time, and then holding them accountable to make sure that they are protecting our environment, making our communities healthy, and defending our democracy. And we are in a troubling time as a country, unfortunately. We are facing attacks from a lot of different sides, and we are seeing a lot of anti-climate folks on the federal level and even here in the state trying to go after the good work that both Dick and Mark have done in the last 30 years. And we are here to defend that work. I will quote Phil Baruth, Senate Pro Tem, last week on Earth Day, said, the words for this year are protect and defend. And so we're going to continue to protect and defend the good work that we've done. And that means that we need to start thinking about the next election, 2026 already. We need to get out into more communities. We need to bring a pro-climate agenda to these communities. We need to do education of voters and education of our communities. And then we need to bring those folks in and really build a pro-climate, pro-democracy movement here in Vermont. So that way we can build our pro-climate majorities in the House and Senate, because we still have pro-climate majorities in the House and Senate. But we need to be able to have bigger ones to make sure we can overcome Governor Scott and his anti-climate agenda. So we have a lot of important work to be done. I know tonight is for celebration. If you want to help us celebrate future victories and be part of the movement, we are always looking for supporters. There are cards on a bunch of the tables where you can donate, become a member or a supporter of Vermont Conservation Voters, and help us lead the fight that we need to be waging right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, here to present for our first honoree of the evening, please welcome a former legislator and former Secretary of State, as well as a dear friend and longtime supporter of VCV, Don Hooper.
Thanks, Justin. I feel really privileged to be able to talk about my best friend for the last 45 years. Mark has been a mentor to me. Lifetime achievement, are you kidding me? You know what the Vermonters said when they said you lived in Vermont all your life? What did you say? Not yet. Anyway, I want to introduce a couple of significant people to Mark. Diana Chase, girlfriend, where are you?
Right here.
Yeah. Max McDonald, raise your hand, Max.
There you
All
go.
right. Charles McDonald, nephew. We're living with how about the McDonald campaign team that worked so hard? Sherry, raise your hand. Sherry. Are we missing anybody from that great team?
Rebecca Roberts.
Rebecca here. Yay! Anyway, thank you, conservation voters. You really, every time we appealed for money for Mark, you came through, and it really, and we worked, we used it. It was no disgrace. He stood for stuff, and he got beat, and that was too bad. We felt bad about it, but you guys were always there for him. So, here's $100. I gave it to the wrong person. That goes to Dan. Anyway, when I asked Mark what he missed most about the legislature not being there, now retired, he said, you know, candidly, this sounds a little hokey, but I miss the testimony. And then he waxed eloquent about the first time he had met Lauren Hurl, which was the reason you were on my mind. He said, oh my God, she came in so pro, so tidy, so efficient, so knowledgeable about what she was speaking on. And it was just an absolutely exemplary model of a citizen legislature listening and McDonald taking it all in, and you bought whatever you were selling. So McDonald has this amazing resume. It's in his DNA that he should be a public servant. His dad was the head of USAID in Turkey, in Vietnam, in Nigeria, and a few other places. He worked for youth conservation in New York City, and so on. That was his father. When I asked Mark, why did you run that first time in 1983, a million years ago? How come? He said, well, my mother, Bobby, had just been the first Democrat to win in this immense horseshoe and very kind of conservative district that stretched from Williamstown through Corinth and Topsail out to Berkshire and so on. And of all ironies, at a time when eggs were 84 cents a dozen, 1983, Mark McDonald's mother died on a March morning delivering eggs to one of her customers in a car crash on her way to Northfield and then the legislature. So he said, I couldn't let all of her amazing work on the school board and all the things that she'd done to be a good citizen of Williamstown, Vermont. I couldn't let that go to waste. And so he ran, and over the course of that time in the legislature, 40 years, almost a dean, he got beat twice, came back, and thank you very much for all that service. So you know what they say about the resume, the thicker the resume, the thicker the student. But in McDonald's case, he piled it on. He's a dairy farmer, 30 Angus, school teacher, 30 years, Vietnam vet, attack helicopter. I mean, how crazy is that? And he was smart, and he was a great public spirited individual in the State House. So he exemplifies public service. He walked the talk. He was smart enough to turn good intent into great public policy, and he became the conscience of the legislature, in my estimation. I served with him first on House Natural Resources and Energy, and then on Ways and Means. We sat together, and he always corrected my bad thinking. He became my mentor. In fact, we had one, we always, because Mark was so goddamn smart, we always gave him the hardest bills to report. He had to do lust, for example. Oh, sorry.
That was not hard for him.
Leaky underground storage tanks. We had to do garbage, the first solid waste bill that we did in 1986. He had to report the amazing battle. The only thing that was going on in '86, the really marquee event, was the showdown between Killington and Cunin on what water quality would be in the upper reaches of the Ottaquechee. Killington wanted to use treated sewage effluent, where the bumper sticker came from, the effluent of the affluent. They wanted to use that to make snow. And so anyway, the House of Natural Resources worked on the bill for 10 weeks, and at the end of it, they came out with a bill that all the Dems said, yeah, we gotta do this, gotta do this. And of course, Mark, they gave it to report. Don, being Don, voted no. And we killed that bill, with all the Republicans, because I didn't believe it would work, it wasn't strong enough. So Mark and I we weren't the Bobbsey twins on every issue, but on that significant one, we were. And I'm sorry, we departed company, and I got a lot of grief for that. I can tell you how many calls I got from your constituents for VNRC saying, Hooper, what a jerk, why are you doing anyway? So, but it was always Mark who was the guy that had to peddle the hard, all the new stuff, and he became our authority on nuclear waste, on the closing down of Yankee current use. He was the only person you could really trust to say, I'm in current use, and I don't want you to water it down anymore. It's a big lien that the state has on all those properties, and the more you sort of cave before, anyway, get into the weeds. So, what are we going to miss in Mark's retirement? We're going to miss somebody who got beat for standing for something. He told me a story after civil unions. He was going door to door, as he always did, and the constituent said, "Hey, I thought we got rid of you," and he said, "You did." And he said, "Well," the constituent said, "Well, who's your replacement?" And Mark said, "You want to know? You voted for him." And the constituent said, "No, Mark, we voted against you." So, anyway,
But he came back.
what are we going to miss? Mark is the best reminder that Orange County is purple. And it's a hard place to maintain. You've got to really be in touch with your constituents, and he did his best to really learn so much door to door. He took all those kitchen table conversations and back porch conversations back to the legislature and used them to make pretty good public policy. And finally, he was somebody who always served on both natural resources and ways and means, natural resources and finance. And usually the money committees are the dying ground for those good environmental conservation ideas. So they get a good vote out of Chris Bray's committee and get over to finance, and then they get killed because they cost, or there was a different mentality in the money committees. And so they'd say, oh, that little stuff, we don't need it. And Mark would figure out a way to bridge that gap. And in some cases, and this is something that's a good reminder to Vipra particularly, who does the scorecard, that sometimes a person in the legislature will vote no on a bill because it's not strong enough, it's not doable, and they'll get dinged for it. And in Mark's case, so the last thing I'm going to say is I wrote to Tim Ash, who's a former president pro tem of the Senate, a few days ago, and unfortunately he just called me about a half hour ago, and he said, "Oh, Hoop, I just got your voicemail. I'm sorry, whatever." And I sent you some notes in my email. He had more good things to say about MacDonald. It was like a big wet kiss. About what a fan he is of Mark, because of all the bad stuff he stopped from happening by saying, kindly slow down a little bit. And then he told he gave a couple of really juicy, beautiful examples, which I've printed out, but I don't want to wreck the program by blathering on and reading them. So, how to conclude? We have a magnificent Vermont painter right here in Randolph, Karen Egley, who, I got your last name pronounced.
Carolyn Egley, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Who did a portrait of Mark a while back. And it is a gorgeous portrait. Many of you have not seen it. A few of you have seen it. It's the kind of portrait. Carolyn, show us what it is. This is the citizen legislator that ought to be hanging. This is a picture that ought to be in the people's house. And in my opinion, Mark represents that citizen legislator who for 40 years chronically took what he'd learned on doorsteps and bring them to the State House to make things better. Thank you very much, Mark.
What Don didn't tell you about the bill where I reported that went down by one vote, we spoke to him afterwards, and he was a little grumpy. Yeah, he said, we finished in the House, that's the tough place to deal with on this bill. That's the toughest place to deal with. We lost by one vote, and now we're going to win in the Senate. And you're going to be on the conference committee. And Don was right. We got a better bill out of the Senate, even though Don voted against it, and his vote against it made it a better law after the Senate had dealt with it. So, Don has taught me more than I've taught him on many, many occasions. Warren? I remember the day she came in, it was on trial, and I want to say, this girl came in and gave us a PhD performance. It was terrific. And I said, she's going places. She's going places. My mother died in an automobile accident, and sometimes at the end of a long day, I'll talk to her. And I always say, if I talk to my mother at midnight and she's not proud of me, I wasn't doing the right thing. But I enjoyed all the services, even losing on occasion. And I'm pleased to have this group here today. And I want to recognize Chris Bray, who is Chair of Natural Resources, who did a lot of the grunt work when it came to checking the small parts of bills and getting the research and getting the witnesses to come in and speak to us. Because much of the heavy lifting came from his setting the line up for the day after day after day. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for being here. And so many more people would like to do short anecdotes with, but we're trying to go over them individually. It's been terrific. Thank you.
Mark McDonald. I have the pleasure of introducing next, not one, not two, but the three senators sent him up here to represent the Windsor district in the Vermont legislature. These three, like our next honoree, are strong environmental champions with a combined lifetime environmental score of a near perfect 98%. Please welcome Senators Allison Clarkson, Joe Major, and Rebecca White.
So what's the first lesson you've learned tonight? It takes 3 Windsor County senators to be as eloquent as 1 Orange County senator. Orange County who? I'm Allison Clarkson, and we have the honor of sort of fleshing out Dick McCormack and providing different aspects of Dick, who is so deserving of this astonishing award, and we're so proud of him. First, just while we're here as a team, I want to just address him as a team player. Dick has been an astonishing team player and so supportive. There is no meeting early enough in the morning that he is not willing to show up for. There is no honk and wave that he is not willing to show up for. There is nothing that we ask that he wouldn't say yes to. And saying yes has meant so much to all of us. And thank you, Dick, for saying yes. Becca is going to talk about Dick as the Cerberus at the gates of Act 250. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to talk about Dick as a team player, Dick as our constitutional scholar. We rely on Dick. We all rely on each other for different things, but one of the things we all turned to Dick for was constitutional authority. And Dick had great constitutional authority. He not only taught it, but he also used it on a regular basis. Every other biennium, we would have constitutional proposals to amend the Constitution. And Dick sometimes agreed with us, and sometimes he didn't. And he went down fighting on one of them, really, completely. Which was, and then ended up, I think, voting for it, finally. But, no, and not even at the polls. Maybe at the polls.
Probably not.
He is consistent. He is consistent. From one former majority leader, another majority leader, who we learned the hard way how to herd cats in the Senate. We had very different pro tems to work with, but we both shared being majority leader in the challenges of bringing people around to yes or no as a collective force. And I honor you for that work, because that is not and wasn't easy work, particularly given the pro tem you had to work with. Everybody here knows who he was the majority leader. The committee chair. He is also, he was a terrific committee chair and chaired a committee he cared enormously about. And I now, as a new committee chair, am so appreciative of what Dick did as a committee chair. It is hard. Chris knows. Chris, also a terrific committee chair. Many of you in the room are committee chairs. Anyway, Dick, as committee chair, got lots and lots of things done, and I actually don't remember all the things you got done, but I know they had to have been good. So I'm just going to trust them, but they were all wonderful. Okay. Yeah. The other thing that I don't think there's another professional musician in the Senate. I think Benning aspired to it, but he never really. But I think Dick still is, and has been our only professional musician that was, and so many. And I think the thing I am I'm so grateful for all of you, but I'm particularly grateful for your institutional memory, and Mark as well. both of you, invaluable, and that is what, in many ways, what we lose when people retire or lose their elections. We lose some of that institutional memory. And with 2/3 of our legislature now being relatively new, that's a lot of loss. And we also have lost, although we are replacing with another very articulate person, but one of our most eloquent senators. Dick's floor debates were legendary. Dick's ability to speak off the cuff, so, to the point, so eloquently, was a gift to all of us. And I am continue to be so grateful for that. And so those are sort of the key sort of aspects of Dick's life. I also would honor him as a grandfather, as a spouse, several times spouse. Save the best for last here. And grandfather. And I think you have enjoyed being a grandfather enormously. It's been and a father and grandfather, but I've watched the grandfathering more than I watched the fathering. We honor you. We are so grateful for your service. We love you, and we just deeply appreciate you. And without further ado, I'm going to give you Joe Major.
Thank you, Allison. So the first time I really met Dick was on the Lieutenant Governor's tour of banned books across the state. So he invited me and Dick at the Norwich bookstore. And so I had an opportunity to talk to Dick for a minute or two, and I kind of cozied up to him and basically said, "When do you retire?" That's sort of a bending of the truth. But I did ask, "So what are you gonna do? I've been hearing things, and I'm interested." And not missing a beat, he said, "You know what? I haven't made my decision yet, but you'll be the first to know." So one night, I'm literally in bed, and I get a text, and he says, "It's time. I'm going to hang it." And then I go, "Oh my God, what have I done?" But through the process of campaigning and learning how to be a senator, which I haven't quite done yet.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. He has been a mentor every step of the way, both good and bad. And I will tell you the bad. So a little birdie, and it's amazing that the people follow these things. A little birdie told him that I may be on the fence of voting something that may alter Act 250 just a little bit. And the voice message that I got, I literally had to lay the phone down, sit down, and just listen. But the wisdom that he has imparted on me, not just about that, but about life in the Senate, and his lovely and beautiful wife has talked to my wife and told what to expect, and as a family, to your family, we are indebted to you. It has been a little difficult when you go and you leave your wife for 4 days out of the week. But she has prepared for it. Cindy was great and gave her advice on what to prepare for. And Dick told me what to prepare for, and still does. I was told by a legislator, he went up to me and he just put his shoe next to mine, knowing that I had won my election, and then said, you know what this shoe is? This is Dick McCormack's shoe, and you've got it. And the daunting thoughts that went through my head was just incredible, because the shadow that you still have over Montpelier is incredible. I, once again, am indebted to you for everything that you've done for me and for us and for Montpelier and for Vermont. We can never repay you. God bless you. God bless you, Cindy. Thank you.
So I'm going to round it out, and I have the privilege of having kind of experienced the full scope of Senator Dick McCormack, because I'm a Windsor County gal. I grew up here. He was my first and actually only state senator who I've had the entire time until I became a state senator. I knew him first as this celebrity folk singer that my mom thought was really cool, and he also happened to be a politician. And she was all about the movement that was happening in Bethel and talking about the power of community. And he kind of was that person in Windsor County through the stories that I heard from other hippies. And then I knew him as almost the elder statesperson in the community who would come to events and talk about the Constitution and talk about what was happening in Montpelier. And then I had the honor of having him as my professor at CCV, where he taught me what U.S. history was after World War II. A subject that gets left out in a lot of public schools because they run out of time. So you don't get to post-World War II. And I learned about McCarthyism from Senator Dick McCormack. I learned about the Vietnam War from Senator McCormack. And I learned about the way that Vermont played a key role in many political discussions that rippled throughout the nation post-World War II. And then I had the complete joy of serving with him in the Vermont State Legislature as a state representative. Having him as the lowly representative to go up to him and say, please listen to this thing that's happening in your committee that you don't care about, but I really care about. And him being so kind and listening to me as a freshman representative. And then I too had a similar conversation as Joe Major did, where I said, when are you retiring? And he told me at that time he wasn't ready to retire. And I thought, as a gutsy young woman, every old man should be retired by now. And I was pretty annoyed by that answer. So when he chose not to retire, and I had the privilege of serving with him for 2 years as equal parts senator, I have grown to regret how I felt so immensely that I have had to apologize to this man for my reaction. Because the privilege of serving alongside him as a state senator, and also to have Senator Mark MacDonald, to have them as the storytellers of the experiences they had as legislators, has guided me through so many important decisions that I have made both personally and professionally. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of the principles that Dick McCormack really made sure that I understood. The first one is to always think about Bucky and Iva. Bucky and Iva are made-up characters that are meant to represent the true Vermonter, the Vermont citizen, the person who isn't reading Vermont Digger and poring over the details, but might have heard about a policy that has to do with water quality at the diner. And they have a little bit of interest, and they're not quite sure what it means, but they need someone with information and with their best interests at heart to help guide them through explaining the process. Also caring about them if they're low income and vulnerable and in situations where the government's decisions have deep impacts on them. He made sure that I was always thinking about Bucky and Iva. And I use that constantly in the State House because you have to think about that person. The second principle that he taught me was that the person who you most disagree with will teach you far more than the person who you most agree with. I saw him go up to senators who, I wouldn't go up and talk to them, especially not about that topic, and he would have exchanges with other senators where it was heated. It was an exchange of ideas. It was like watching two like locked horn sheep on a mountain. Like, wow, this is what this is. And he would leave those conversations not being convinced that he was right or wrong, but with more information and a better discussion on the floor and a better discussion in committee. And that has really stuck with me because we seem to have a lot more people who disagree with me now in the Senate. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is his mentorship. And I don't think you can fully understand Senator Dick McCormack's impact until you start talking to individuals in the State House who have had the opportunity, like Senator Joe Major, who have had the opportunity to be mentored by him in any aspect, whether or not that's explaining how the system works parliamentarily or how they themselves can improve and learn. He was always there to offer advice and support and assistance, and often to the detriment of maybe his own personal projects, like another record. Where is that? What is happening? Are you making it? Can we hear the music? So Voices in the Hills we need Voices in the Hills too. But that's really where I want to end, is I feel really blessed that I've had the intergenerational friendship of Senator Dick McCormack. And I'll end with something that he recently told me, because his shadow does loom large in Montpelier. I've had a situation the last few weeks that has been very trying. And the first call I made that evening was to Senator Dick McCormack, because I didn't know who else I needed. I just didn't know where to go or who to talk to, and the first person that came to mind was Dick. And he provided an analogy for me that has really been very comforting in these times. And I don't want to, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about how terrible it is right now to be an American, and how disturbing it is to live in authoritarianism as we're experiencing it. But this is what Senator Dick McCormack said to me when I called him emotional. He said, right now, you're in the rapids. Your boat is underwater. You are sinking and you are moving quickly downstream. Your only job right now is to get gasps of air and to not hit your head on the rocks. And that has kept me going the last few weeks. I'm not hitting my head on the rocks, and we thank you, Senator McCormack, for your
So we honor you, Dick. We honor you, we treasure you, and we love you. Dick McCormack,
First of all, colleagues, thank you so very much. And a lifetime achievement award, you have to be old to get one of those. And I realize I'm actually old, and I'm old and I'm male, which means I am competitive even when I shouldn't be. And I find that I'm looking at all my old friends and thinking, okay, I'm going to stay out of the nursing home longer than he is. I'm going to win. My music. One of the songs, I've never thought of it as my best song. Right? It's a good song called Voices in the Hills. I did write some better ones, but this was I've always been proud. No, it's a good song. And it has in it a line it's about a Vermont farm family. I wrote this like 40 years ago. And it has the line, as the city closed in on us, the one choice looked too easy. Go broke from paying taxes or get rich from selling land. And when I got to the legislature, one of the things I did for my entire career was to defend current use valuation and current use taxation, where we tax agricultural land on its agricultural value, not on its market value for development. And the idea of making the mind work with the heart.
is a challenge for me. Maybe I'm reluctant to compare myself to Thomas Jefferson. I think this is probably the only thing. No, but Jefferson said, I think it was in a love letter, he wrote about the lifelong argument between his brain and his heart. And my sense is if you only function with your brain, you risk becoming a monster. You can have precision logic, but it might lead you bad places. If you lead with your heart, the best you can hope for is that you're going to be ridiculous. What I try to do is to think as clearly as I can, and having arrived at a conclusion I'm comfortable with, figure out, do I feel good about it? And often I don't. And if I don't feel good about it, that doesn't cancel. I don't let my heart cancel my logic. But it does mean my heart says to me, you haven't thought enough. Go back and think more. And I've tried, and I hope I've done this. And I don't think I've always succeeded. Like anyone my age, I have regrets. I look at things and I think, no, that was a mistake. If I had it to do over again, I'd do it differently. Including, I probably sent Mark notes saying, be nice. Across the table. Mark did not brook fools lightly. And sometimes I even said it out loud. No, Mark, be nice. I also thought out loud about bills we were working on, which then went out to the public. What I mostly think about these days is, with the environment, I think about my grandfather and my father, both of whom were science teachers. And I'll never forget the day I said to my physics teacher grandfather, I was not going to major in business law, as he had suggested. I was going to major in ancient Greek philosophy. And when he said, what are you going to do with ancient Greek philosophy? I said, I don't know if I'm going to do anything. I don't think of education, Grandpa, as job training. I think of education as the pursuit of truth and beauty for their own intrinsic value. That was a much better reaction than I got from my grandpa. What he said was, and those of you who have old Vermont relatives will recognize this. He looked at me and he said, and I quote, "Gaw." Which has nothing to do with the Creator and Lord of the universe. Gaw. Means I'm embarrassed to be in the same species as you. But to my grandfather, physics was not all that interesting. Physics was the scientific basis for engineering. Biology was the scientific basis for medicine. Biology was the scientific basis for medicine. Chemistry was the basis for, monkeying with stuff. My grandfather looked at things to have a function, some purpose out there. And he was nevertheless a scientist. My father was a scientist. When my friends would say, "Mommy, why is the sky blue?" they got one of two answers. I'm busy, stop asking stupid questions. Or, because God wanted it that way. My father would say, well, the prevailing theory is, and I said, Daddy, I don't want to know the theory, I want to know the truth. And he said, someday, when you die, if you're very good, a lot of people believe that God will tell you the truth about everything. But as long as we're on Earth, all we have is mere human intelligence. And mere human intelligence, at its best, is science. And when I look at the world we're in now, and I look at the environment and the environmental issues, I think of my father. Science. And we now have the notion among many people that because, in fact, turn on Fox if you want to hear this at work. Because everyone's equally entitled to an opinion, it therefore follows that all opinions are equal. And you're supposed to be fair and balanced. So you have the science talking about global warming, and then you get the crackpots talking it down. Yeah, you've got to give equal weight to the crackpots. And that was the battle that all of us were fighting at the time I left. And I look at you folks, and I say what an old girlfriend of mine once said. Woo, sure glad that's not my problem. But it is my problem. It's everyone's problem. You're carrying the weight for us, and I so appreciate your effort. I am so proud to have been part of you. One of the things that humbles you if you're a retiring politician is that the legislature, no legislator does anything on a solo level. It's all teamwork. Nothing happens without the teamwork. So anything I failed at, I live with the regret. Anything I count as a success, I often wonder, it probably would have happened if I wasn't there. Because I was one of the dozens of people who made it happen. And among the people who made it happen are the people, the lobbying groups, the environmental groups, who actually have done the science and who testify. My brother Kurt once said, serving in the legislature is like being in grad school. You sit at a table and people who really, really know what they're talking about explain things to you. And it has been a great privilege. I just did a 6,000-mile, 15-state Amtrak trip. Amtrak! Okay, Kurt? And I have enjoyed my retirement, but I miss you all terribly, and I miss the work. And please don't be strangers. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, John Hooper, for sponsoring the event and presenting an award this evening. Thank you to the Windsor delegation as well. And also the other environmental legislative champions we have in the audience tonight, both past and present. Chris Bray, David Zuckerman, Tim Berglin, Patsy Shred, Larry Sakowitz, Renee Priestley, Kim Naslin. Anyone else I might have forgotten, please raise your hand. We have this space for another hour or so. Please stick around. The bar is open. We would love for you to help us meet our minimum. We have plenty of food. Please grab something to eat. And thank you to Evelyn Seidner also for helping out with this event. And let's give one last roaring applause to Mark MacDonald and Dick McCormack.